Hello, welcome to episode 106 of Partners in Crime. It's been a lovely week weather-wise, hasn't it, Bob?
It's been a smasher and continues to be so. Yes, I'm as anyone watching this, as opposed to listening to it, see, I am now in my study with the curtains down, and outside the sun is shining, and spring continues on its way towards summer, and it's always absolutely gorgeous. So we've just been spending the whole time in the garden in this lockdown, and enjoying every moment of it. I'm learning more about flowers than I ever knew was possible. Never been one for being known for being particularly green-fingered. So yeah, it's been absolutely great. How about you?
Well, I've had a love-hate relationship with the garden this week. I've been enjoying the sunshine as always. I've been out in the garden. I've been replenishing my feeders. The birds have been nibbling on my fat balls, and it's been wonderful. Except I did a bit of gardening the other day, and I injured myself, to say the least. I dropped a pot and instinctively went to catch it just as it's smashed, and I managed to stab myself in the middle finger with a large piece of ceramic, which split my finger down the middle. A 2-inch gash, almost to burn. I'm going to, for anybody on Patreon who is watching the video, I'm going to put a couple of pictures up of it now. Avert thine eyes if you don't want to see it. But this is how it's ended up now as it's healing.
God.
The initial cut, after it had been cleaned of blood, so just show the actual incision, was here.
Oh,
so, yeah,
my goodness!
right down the finger.
Absolutely. To listeners, it looks like sort of one of those extraordinary pieces of prosthetic makeup that they do in Casualty every now and again, and you go, "Ah, that's awful."
It's typing, which is fun because you stretch your fingers in some weird ways, and pain-wise, it's kind of fine now. I mean, the actual when it happened, it hurt quite a bit, but
I bet it did.
It doesn't hurt now. It's just if I do anything other than kind of hold it limply. So if I try to type or write or anything with it, it stretches the skin and splits it open again, which is not much fun.
Well, I mean, you poor thing. I mean, I was surprised there. Your finger looks absolutely terrible, but I suppose it could have been worse. You could have actually split your fat balls, and your sparrows would have been at a loss to know what to do for the rest of the week.
I do have this now, though.
Oh my goodness me! Look at that. Now, that's the sort of thing I think umpires should have in cricket. Adam is holding up his heavily bandaged finger. The bandage is white, but it is sort of, well, actually, it's the middle finger, so you couldn't use it for cricket. That would give completely the wrong signal. Yeah. But I always think that the umpires should have just a little white stick at the end of their thing when they're giving players out for LBW or caught behind or whatever it is. But anyway, so that's how dramatic. Are you still in pain?
Caught out, stick the middle finger up, off you go.
I think the batsman usually traditionally does the middle finger, not in cricket, of course, because that's not the manner in which cricket is played.
That is not cricket.
It's simply not cricket. So you poor thing, you're still in pain.
No, the pain's fine. At first, it was quite painful because it pretty much stabbed me down to the bone. But once that initial pain had worn off, a few hours later, no, it's fine. It's just trying not to kind of move it and stretch it too much so I don't split it open. I've got to try and wait for it to heal, because what I didn't want to do, what I probably should have done, is gone to hospital and got it stitched. But, there's a few things going on in hospitals at the moment, and I was keen, A, not to burden them, and B, place greater risk on myself for an injured finger. So,
well, I suppose so, but apparently A&Es have been pretty much empty, not empty completely, but very sort of, people haven't been going to hospital at all because of understandable fear of COVID. But of course, they've been putting off what would otherwise be very important trips to accident and emergency, or the ER room, as they say in the States, because of that. So what have you done? If it's not stitching, you're just hoping it's just going to sort of,
I mean, it seems to be holding back together now. It's not too bad. As I'll show you the photo from last night there. It's kind of it's back together again. It is holding together. I've strapped it up so that I can't.
Even so, it's inconvenient. So you've been very narrowly missed creating an extra finger there. So yeah, that's well. Anyway, and of course, even more awful is the fact that you actually broke a pot. What sort of pot was it? Sort of a.
It was like a sort of small blue ceramic one.
Yeah, so
it's
they're
a
not.
shame.
They're
It
not.
comes from a.
They're not inexpensive, although apparently at
Yeah.
Frost's, if you are actually sort of venturing out and keeping your social distance, there's a very good Frost the Garden Centre. This is, if you happen to be in the mid-Bedfordshire area, a very good deal on garden pots. Some of them are half price. So there we are.
Well, mine's half smashed.
I'll just check my bank account to see whether it's a deposit from Frost the Garden Centre has gone in. Not that that's much use if you're listening from the. Sorry?
That's the annoying thing. There were 3 or 4 of the same style in different colours, which look quite nice together. And I'm now one down, which is a shame, but there we go.
Well, I know how you value your garden. What a beautiful thing your garden is and how well kept it is. So there we are.
The blood spatters help.
That's it. Well, thank God it was just your finger. So what news have you today in the world of crime literature, be it?
Well, quite a bit, actually.
I read an
article.
Television or radio.
All sorts, yes. I read an article in The Guardian a few days ago which said they'd done a survey of 1,000 people, representative of the national population, and found that the time people have been spending on books has almost doubled, and crime and thrillers are the favoured genres. This is research done by Nielsen. They found that 41% of people said they were reading more books since the lockdown on the 23rd of March. The Nation has also increased the amount of time it spends reading books from around 3.5 hours a week to 6, with just 10% of adults saying they were reading less. Readers also revealed their tastes have changed since the outbreak of COVID-19, with their interest in crime and thrillers and other popular fiction increasing. And apparently, according to Nielsen, there is currently little appetite for dystopian fiction, with I will mention shortly. 52% of respondents said they were reading more because they had more spare time. 51% said it was because they wanted to stay entertained, and 35% felt books were providing an escape from the crisis. Louise Doughty, who we mentioned last week, who's longlisted for the Theaks and All Peculiar Crime Novel of the Year, said it was a mistake to assume that during difficult times people want light escapist reading or heartwarming tales. They want to be absorbed, she said. That means they'll go for any book where there's a story that will pull them in and hold their attention. Peter May also comments, the crime writer Peter May, because his thriller Lockdown, which he wrote in 2005, which is set during a flu pandemic in London, which we've mentioned a couple of times on the show before, he said that readers seem to be finding comfort in his story of a world which is eerily similar to our own. He said, when I first wrote the book, it was thought that readers would not be able to identify with a world in which society has battened down the hatches against a deadly pandemic. Sadly, it has now become an only too familiar scenario, and oddly, people seem to take comfort from that too. So this week, I read Lockdown by Peter May, the one with I managed to get myself a copy of that. I read it all through in 2 days.
Yes.
And it is bizarre. It does seem kind of post-apocalyptic almost. The flu in Peter May's book is seemingly far more damaging than the coronavirus is here, thankfully.
Yes.
I think something like a 80% mortality rate the flu has in this book. It's not about a pandemic, it's not about the quarantine and the lockdown, but it is very much the background and the fabric on which really a very, very interesting and very engaging crime story is written. So I would recommend that one. It was a very intriguing read that kept me gripped.
Well, funnily enough, I got a message on, well, it was sort of a round message on Facebook with a picture of my lovely friend, the actor Peter Forbes.
Hang on.
Name drop alert. Name drop alert. Name drop alert. Name drop alert.
There we go.
Yes. Yeah. And there's a picture of him, and he's sitting, and he says, "Here I am in my home studio, and I've just finished narrating that very book."
Oh, really?
He narrates all of Peter May's books. So that's an interesting segue, isn't it? And your first chance for the name drop alert and I know how much you love it, and I'll do my best to actually just feed your outlandish addiction. So that's fascinating. Well, so and it was great watching Peter performs in his studio, because last week there was another actor friend of mine who's, I will not mention his name.
It's all right, the name drop alert only works once per show, so you might as well.
Yeah, that's great.
Free reign now.
And anyway, Simon Williams, who's in the Archers, maybe I mentioned this before, he sent a picture of himself in his home studio that he'd made, because he's in the Archers, and of course everyone's recording from home and sending in their bits and pieces. So I mean that's how industrious and creative some artistic people have been, and the artistic industry. Usually they gather in Birmingham where they make the Archers. For those abroad that who may not know, the Archers is a long-running, probably the longest running. It is the longest-running radio soap. What did I say? Television soap. Can you imagine? And well loved. It's a national treasure in the UK. Set in the English countryside in a village, and all the sort of ups and downs, ins and outs, and intrigue that goes on there. It's been going since I think the 1950s. Anyway, so there we are. So I'm just in the process of building, with your help, my own little studio. I've got a little box here, and I've got a mic over there, and I've got a thingy over here, and as Tommy Cooper would say,
just all the technical terminology then.
Yeah, I've got the whole thing. I haven't actually managed to stick it all together yet, because there's clamps and there's leads and there's all sorts of things. But the next rainy day, it's going to be up and running. You'll know it's going to be up and running because I'll be on the phone saying, "What do I do? Where do I stick? Where do I stick this plug?" Anyway, so that's I guess interesting for those actors and people who broadcast who are actually doing it at home, as indeed are we. It's been interesting, this experiment, hasn't it? Because it's working quite well. Nothing quite beats sitting at your shoulder in the studio, Adam, I have to say, and sipping your delightful coffee. But we're doing pretty well, really, I think. Well, you've done very well.
We can. We are looking at measures which will enable us to get back in the studio together, especially now that one of us has had COVID-19, mentioning no names.
Yeah.
If we are able to do that in the next few weeks, then we hope to be able to do that only once it's completely safe to do so, of course. In the meantime, we are investing in some new gear and some new kit that will make recording Partners in Crime even better. We'll have even better quality video and sound and everything for you. So yeah, by the way, if you are wondering, we were talking about sort of showing pictures and videos and things like that. Of course, it's a podcast, so you might be wondering why you can't see it. That is exclusive to our Patreon subscribers. Our Patreon subscribers donate a very small amount each month in order to help keep us broadcasting and keep us producing shows for you. I think it starts from £2 a month or £2 a month, something like that. If you head over to patreon.com/crime fiction podcast, you get all sorts of benefits and extra nice things that you don't get otherwise. For example, you get access to our after show, Partners in Crime, Arsenic and Old Lace, which is about another 50% on top of the show. Every week we do an extra show, an extra episode exclusively for our Patreon members. And something I am going to do as well, so that you can see what the videos look like and what a different experience it is as a Patreon subscriber. We're going to put this episode, the video of this episode, on YouTube, on our Partners in Crime YouTube channel, so that you'll be able to see that and see what it looks like, and see what you're missing out on if you're not already a subscriber, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
And so the very first one that some people will see is you actually giving me the middle finger, albeit beautifully bandaged.
Why not?
What a start! What a start! Well, that's great. But I'm going to go on and do some terrible self-publicizing, but it doesn't happen very often, as regular listeners and watchers will know. Yesterday, which is Thursday, the 21st of May, the series that I made, detective series, a long-running detective series, Truman and Riley, is published on Kobo and many other platforms around the globe, and there it is. by Brian
Move out to the
B.
side there so we can see it.
Thompson. And I'll tell you a little bit about it, but lots of people have asked me, and I'm sure I've explained it on a few occasions on this podcast, where did I begin to get an interest in crime fiction and crime writing? Well, I think it was at the turn of the century. I can say that now because it's a
Which century?
Yeah, you get a very good point. At the turn of the century, I'd been writing bits and pieces. I've been writing mostly comedy. And suddenly I got an idea for a detective series about a chap who'd had a nervous detective inspector who had a nervous breakdown, had a very intellectual approach to policing, and was trying to come back to form, as it were, and was going to set it in Yorkshire. Anyway, I wrote a treatment and sent it to my agent at Independent, and they looked at it. Paul Stevens looked at it, and he said, "Well, okay. What do you want to do? Do you want to write this?" And I said, "No, I don't think I could. I don't think I could begin to write this. We need a really good writer to come on board and to develop the idea further." So they set me up with Brian B. Thompson in one of their lovely meeting rooms in Oxford Street is where they were then, and we sat down for a couple of days and we worked through the ideas and various other things, and Brian went away and wrote the first Truman and Riley, and then of course every other episode of it from then on in, and made it very much his own, with his own particular comedy and eccentricity and various other things that are involved. But I'll just read you, listeners, a little bit about this. The cast, by the way, for those who don't know, I'll guess through the series, and there's some lovely actors coming in on that. But
I know you gave yourself a role as well, didn't you?
Yeah, of course I did. You don't get that opportunity very often. I said I won't write it, but I'll tell you what, I'll be in it. And so we're looking for, it was Truman. The first one was called Truman. It became Truman and Riley because fortunately we managed to attract an actor that we narrowly avoided working with each other on a couple of times, and I was a great fan of his, Duncan Preston, who many people will know from Victoria Woods and Emmerdale and countless appearances at the RSC and on television. A terrific actor, and he agreed to play Detective Sergeant Riley. So in that respect, we were away. So here it is. D.I. Truman and D.S. Riley are reluctant partners in crime fighting, paired up after high flyer Truman suffered a nervous breakdown that left him struggling to get back on his feet. Working with Riley isn't exactly what the doctor ordered, but the sergeant turns out to be much more of a help than a hindrance when it comes to cracking cases. It was first broadcast as Truman in 2002. The pilot episode centers around a student found shot dead next to a bag of cocaine. Is it a routine drugland killing or something more sinister? Series opener Angel Heights sees Truman and Riley re-examining the death of a jockey, while in The Road to Hull, two brothers claim to have given up their life of crime. But then a corpse turns up, and it goes through all the various episodes. And we had such a good time with this. In fact, I think our director was a wonderful Toby Swift, and Duncan Preston. We laughed at the BBC's expense, on the BBC's expense, I should say, not at, for many of the years that we were recording these up in Broadcasting House in that wonderful studio, which is a legendary studio. One of the people who know how radio drama was made over the years, with the personal sound effects, doing the coconuts for horses galloping and all the rest of it. All of that was in that studio and still is. It's a wonderful studio, different sort of floorings to make different noises as different characters approach and everything, making cups of tea and all the rest of it. And indeed, it's made slightly differently now in some areas. When I did a Doctor Who and Torchwood recently, it's a very different technique where the sound effects and everything are added digitally afterwards, but the BBC still continues to do it in the traditional manner with a sound effects stage manager who is in charge of virtually all the sound effects that are made around the actors, so the actors can just concentrate on the script in hand. But I seem to recall someone coming to a recording at Broadcasting House of the last series.
I did, yeah.
The chap who was just starting out as a crime writer, I seem to recall. Whose name was
I
Adam.
remember sitting there in the
Croft.
editing suite with the director and the producer and everybody, and watching it all going on and getting a little tour of the studio. Yeah, it was a lovely day out. It was very good fun. Lovely to meet Duncan as well and have a cup of tea with him. It was really actually very insightful to see how these things are put together, and great experience. I've still got my.
There is a downside because you had to sort of actually sit through about.
Yes, there was a number
we
of
both
hours.
stopped talking at the same time. That you see,
we did. That was good. That wasn't it?
Well, you did. You seem to be. You were the quietest I've ever known you, actually, and that's probably because you were in a little cubicle where the directors and the technicians sit and watch. It's a little bit like the bridge of the Starship Enterprise, isn't it? Yes, where all the technical things, but of course that is totally soundproof. So I could see you talking, but I couldn't hear you. A bit like doing this podcast occasionally. But anyway, we went on and we had a great time with the series, as I say. And there were many wonderful actors who came to guest on it. I'll run through some of them now. Richard Linton, who you may remember does a BBC detective series for many years about forensics, starring, I'll give you another clue, one member of the Fox family, Amelia Fox.
Okay, yes. Yeah, so Silent Witness.
Silent Witness, yes. Polly Hemingway, Katie Kavanagh. Oh my goodness me, the names go on. Henry Goodman came and did an episode. Susan Penhaligon, and someone called Amy Robbins. My wife turned up to do an episode called Vanished, which broadcast on the 8th of January 2008. Anyway, enough of me rambling on. Please get it. You'll have great fun. Brian B. Thompson is extraordinary, eccentric, funny, does all sorts of interesting things, because it's a real challenge to get into. The first episodes are 3/4 of an hour, but then the rest of the series were in half-hour format. So it's very hard to actually get a case with a beginning, middle, and a conclusion within such a short period of time. So it was a great challenge, and he did an extraordinary job. So I'd raise a glass of champagne to him on the launch of this audio. But try and get it on Kobo, as we say, or whatever platform you can find it on. I mean, the BBC do it as well, but Kobo, of course, it's available on Kobo. So go to them if you possibly can. That's Truman and Riley, detective radio drama at its most interesting.
Available on Kobo, as are all of the books we're talking about on today's show. We're going to rattle through a few more as well before we finish. But if you're new to Kobo, if you've not bought a book from them before, then now's the time to do it. You don't need an e-reader or any special device. You can read on your phone or tablet if you like, although their e-readers are superb. Head over to kobo.com and use the promo code CRIME at the checkout for 90% off of your first purchase from Kobo. If you're an existing customer, use the link in the show notes to find a list of eligible books that you can claim 40% off of moving forward, making your reading effectively almost half price, which is lovely. I spotted something in the news this week, Bob, which we should have led with, really, actually, rather than an injured finger, because it's quite an explosive headline. Did Agatha Christie borrow the plot for an acclaimed novel? This was an article in The Observer last week by Vanessa Thorpe about one of Agatha Christie's best-known mysteries, the murder of Roger Ackroyd. Fresh evidence suggests that Agatha Christie may have taken the idea from an acclaimed Norwegian author, Lucy Moffat, who is
Scandi Noir or Scandi Old.
Yeah, before it was, yeah.
Scandi Oldie.
Yeah, she's a British translator living in Norway. She's found a likely source for the famous solution to the murder in an early English magazine translation of Stein Riverton's story Jernvognen, which is the Iron Chariot in Norwegian. The book was first published in Norway in 1909. And it's since been voted the greatest Norwegian crime novel by the Norwegian Crime Novelist Association. So this is not a small, unheard of book. Until now, the matching plots looks like a mere coincidence. It has been pointed out before, but because Riverton's book did not come out in Britain until after the publication of Roger Ackroyd, it didn't raise many eyebrows. In fact, the book was not available in English until 2005. Agatha Christie died, I believe, in 76 or 77, so she obviously hadn't read it in English. And Christie didn't read Norwegian, so it's extraordinarily unlikely that she had read it. Case closed then, says the Observer article, if Moffat had not remembered an online reference to a one-off publication of the story in a British crime magazine of the era, Tip Top Stories of Adventure and Mystery. It ran for just 6 months between 1923 and 1924 before it merged with the Sovereign magazine. Remember that name? But Moffat tracked down a rare copy in the British Library, and the April 1924 edition of Tip Top Stories of Adventure and Mystery contained a translation of that Riverton story. The timing apparently is quite convenient because Agatha Christie published a short story under the pen name of Mary Westmacott in the Sovereign magazine in January 1926, barely 2 years after. So there is a connection there.
The thick plottons, my goodness me.
Moffat says, we do not claim this is conclusive proof that Christie borrowed the idea for Roger Ackroyd, said a spokesperson from Lightning Books, actually, the publisher of Moffat's recent translation, and said that Agatha Christie herself was always suspicious of coincidences without evidence. There are 2 acknowledged sources of inspiration for Roger Ackroyd. Agatha Christie wrote to Lord Mountbatten later in her life to thank him for the unique literary device that made the book famous. I'm avoiding spoilers. And in the same letter, she actually said her brother-in-law James had come up with the same ruse, according to this Observer article. Matthew Pritchard, her grandson, who now runs Agatha Christie Estate, said it's possible she read it because she read a lot, but it's also possible she didn't. Which is nice and conclusive.
Well, that's another mystery to add to her disappearance on the true real life a mystery. Did she nick? You can't say nick. Did she borrow? I like that. Did she borrow the plot to
or find inspiration?
Roger Ackroyd. God, how fascinating. Well, I suppose, where do ideas come from? Well, all over the place, we well know. But, I've sometimes thought about this. You take in so many things. And certainly if you're writing, you're constantly taking information and reading books and what have you. And there must come a time with writers to some degree where what they imagine is an original thought is something they may well have read years and years ago that's gone into the subconscious mind and has come out as a plot or a plot twist or something like that, and they've written it only to have someone say, "Wait, you're nicked. That's not an original idea." Well, I suppose some people would say that there are only so many stories, and all stories stem from about 7 classic sort of stories. I don't know the ins and outs of that. Well, I sort of do. I've read the books, but it's fascinating. Did she nick Roger Ackroyd? Well, if she did it absolutely splendidly. And God, I do love a true life mystery. Well, there we go. Well, I'm gonna. I have a book. Yes. Now, as I was talking about, Truman and Riley was set. The first 3 episodes were set in Hull, and then they moved to Leeds for the rest of the series. So that reminded me of one of my favourite books by David Mark, our friend of Partners in Crime, who is a terrific writer and a very entertaining chap, whose Hector McAvoy series I absolutely adore, and has set about writing a new set of books more recently. But Cold Bones, I'll give you the blurb for this because it's a smashing book and David Mark at his best. It's the coldest winter in Hull for years. When McAvoy is told by a concerned stranger that an elderly woman hasn't been seen for a few days, he goes to check on her, only to find her body encased in ice. The heating off, the windows open, the whole house frozen over. It could be a macabre accident, but when McAvoy finds a series of cryptic messages, he senses murder. Someone watched her die. As he starts to uncover the victim's story and her connections to a lost fishing trawler, his boss, Trish, is half a world away investigating a mysterious death in Iceland. Hull and Iceland have traditionally been united by fishing, but in this case they are united by a secret concealed for half a century and a series of brutal killings that have never been linked. Until now, when the secrets of the dead have returned to prey on the living. Aficionados of the grittiest, most trenchant fare love Mark's copper Hector McAvoy, who customarily moves in a darkly realised Hull. That's the Financial Times. I think I've recommended this book before, and I do so again for those who didn't catch it the first time. David Mark deals with, as it says in the Financial Times, a darkly realised Hull. Truman and Riley, again, opening a fairly darkly realised Hull, but whenever I've been to Hull, I have to say I find it a very jolly place, and the fish is very fresh. So anyway, there we are. That's David Mark. Get it if you can. Cold Bones available on Kobo.
Lovely. And I spoke to David actually, and interviewed him for Partners in Crime. Got an interview there we're going to use at a future date when we run out of other stuff to talk about. And if you want to hear more from him as well, we spoke to him on episode 25, I believe, was a David Mark interview special. So yes, go back and listen to that. I've still got. Sorry, go on, Bob.
No. After you with what you've still got.
So I've still got a load more to talk about here. Our time is up, though. We've got another 3 things I want to talk about. So they're going to have to go over into Arsenic and Old Lace, our after-show show for patrons. If you do want to watch this video, as I said, I'm going to put this one up on our Partners in Crime YouTube channel, so you can watch this episode rather than just listen to it, and you can see what all the Patreon fuss is about. What on earth's that?
I'm sorry. I was listening to what you said. I was just deciding whether to use the factor 30 in the garden this afternoon. I mean, it is tough deciding on which strength of airf you need to use in the garden. I think I'll use this one. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Carry on.
That's okay. I prefer protection from the inside, so I'm going to sit in the beer. There we go. There's the punchline gone on. I'm not going to bother anymore. I'll just leave it there. All right, so there we go. I clearly need a drink, don't I?
I think you definitely need another. Have you got a cup of coffee with you?
I did have. It's gone now. It's so
is mine. Well, there we are. You got to keep the caffeine coming, especially when you're producing a high octane podcast like Partners in Crime. It's very demanding of you mentally and physically, so keep the caffeine coming, keep yourself alert, and until next week, for those listening, thank you very much indeed, and we're going to record a little something else for 10 minutes.
Yes, shall we do it?
Yeah, bye.
Partners in Crime was presented by Adam Croft and Robert Daws and produced by Adam Croft. The theme tune was by the Caesareans. The Partners in Crime logo and imagery were designed by Stuart Beisch. Partners in Crime is sponsored by Kobo, your favourite local bookshop, perfected.